This is Digital Trends Live. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate everybody who tunes into this show every day. We're live at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and we get to talk about technology and all of the cool use cases for it. 3D printing is something we bring up here a lot on the show, and it's always exciting to find new uses for it and how people are adapting it. And something we haven't ever discussed on here is musical instruments. 3D printing musical instruments. Well, we're going to talk about that and more. To do so, we have, well, a man you probably know him, one, as the drummer for Panic at the Disco, but also we're going to talk about 3D printing technology. We have Dan Pawlovich joining us here right now. Dan, thanks for being here on Digital Trends Live.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it a lot and excited to talk to you. I mean, just as a musician who's out performing all the time on stage and the different ways that we've seen tech evolve in that aspect as far as on-stage sound. But 3D printing is not something that I don't think that I've ever actually heard of being used for musical instruments. And this is something that you're working on right now. And I wanted to give everybody just kind of an overview. Can you talk about how you came into this spectrum and what it was about it that attracted you?
Yeah, well, it was initially just an idea I had as a young musician or a young drummer, kind of taking apart my drum kit when I got bored of like how it looked or the color of it. And just in doing that, it kind of got me started on what makes drums tick or what makes drums resonate in this case. And so it was just an idea that always stuck into my head of how I could improve upon this design that has been largely unchanged since more traditional drums that we're familiar with were first made. And then fast forward to about 6 or 7 years ago, I was just cruising YouTube and I saw a video of a person who went into a 3D printing facility with a real crescent wrench, and they 3D scanned the crescent wrench, and then they ended up printing that crescent wrench in a 3D printer. And when they took it out of the printer and dusted the whole thing off, there's a gear that was printed with it, and the jaw was printed with it. And without even having to assemble anything, the crescent wrench worked right off the printer. And at that moment, I knew that 3D printing was something that I wanted to research further and get into.
Yeah, I mean, it really is pretty amazing just that example alone, just the fact that you could print a wrench and have it work. And you think about that from a drum standpoint, I think that's hilarious that you're taking it apart, trying to figure out different ways to do it. I know a lot of drummers who would do the same thing, trying to figure out a different way to change up the system or the look or what's going on with it. And there's so many different aspects and facets to that I imagine that'd be a difficult thing to change. It seems like there's a reason that it's been, a standard drum set for so long, because it's been hard to change that up. But with 3D printing, it sounds like now you have all these different possibilities for design and structure that you didn't have before. Can you talk through some of those aspects?
Oh yeah, that's actually a perfect thing to talk about. So what's actually different about this drum as opposed to traditional drums is traditional drums would be a wooden shell with a whole bunch of metal parts kind of screwed to it, which, traditional drums are fine. They all sound great. They are obviously still my favorite things to play. But when you clamp on or screw on a whole bunch of things to them, they kind of lose their natural resonance. What 3D printing allows me to do, and what you're actually kind of seeing in this video right now, is the parts that are normally metal that are screwed to the drum, in this case, are actually printed at once. You're seeing it on video right now, the printing actually happening. Those pieces that are sticking out from the side of the shell have never been created as part of the drum shell before. And I mean, there's certain methods you could probably use between machining and molding, but the specific possibility of doing something exactly like what we've done here can't be done any other way except for 3D printing. And that's kind of what, again, got me started on this whole thing. And now at this point, it's been about 6 years since I've been working on it and designing it and getting it to this point.
Sorry, I got caught looking at the video there myself.
It's pretty cool. It's a little mesmerizing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, because I've been thinking about that. So with the actual drum itself, there's no metal fasteners that are on there. That's all 3D printed into it, and then just as it was showcasing. So the body of the drum itself is completely 3D printed from the ground up.
Yeah, well, we did as much as we possibly could do, but eventually it has to mate with industry standard parts, which would be the metal hoops, the mylar drum heads, and to actually put tension on that drum, it has to withstand pretty great forces.
Yeah.
So these were all taken into account um, in the design phase, which took about 3.5 years before we actually printed the first one. I wanted to make sure that we didn't get it and it was just a novelty. I wanted to have the first print be able to be used and last on the road for as many years as we possibly could. And at this point, I mean, it held up for I mean, at least 4 or 5 tours in a row so far.
Wow.
Two full record cycles, and it's flawless and unfazed whatsoever. I could go on forever, but tour is really tough on the people that are involved in the tour and the instruments that are involved in the tour, and it hasn't been phased whatsoever. So I think it's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, 3 or 4 tours and a couple of album cycles. I mean, that's a lot of stress on, on drums, let alone, you know, accidental droppings or whatever could happen. You know, things happen.
It all happens.
Yeah. So the fact that it held up, that's amazing. So with this, you know, what are and you've been doing this. How are you bringing this to other people, and how can other people start looking at it and thinking about how they can 3D print their instruments?
Well, actually, it's things similar to this have been done before. As far as I know, some guitar bodies have been printed. I imagine someone's probably tried to print an entire guitar. I know about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, someone printed like a whole drum kit worth of just the shells. That didn't involve. They actually still use the traditional method of clamping metal lugs onto the shells, and the shells were hollow. It was cool. It was more of an art piece. So I think people are definitely experimenting with 3D printing a lot already. And I didn't get to the version of the drum that I have now, or even the version of the drum that I can imagine we might see in the future, without being inspired by other people that are already doing really amazing things with 3D printing. I mean, last week I saw that someone had printed an entire boat hull with like a robotic arm, and I mean, the thing is like 35 or 40 feet long. So we're just messing with something that's 15 inches wide diameter. So
Right.
The sky's the limit.
Now you just need to get some robotic arms on your kick drum, and then, you know, you're set.
Oh, I don't know. I need some job security.
That's true. Never mind. I didn't mean that way.
Yeah, right.
It'll just hold the cymbals for you.
This isn't live, right?
Right. We'll cut that out. Well, I mean, going from there, you know, and what you've done, how, you know, for other musicians out there who are inspired by this and want to, you know, start experimenting, what would you recommend for them to do?
For musicians, I mean,
as far as experimenting with printing their own drums or doing something like what you're doing.
You can contact me if you want. No, right now I kind of see this whole idea as the ground floor or the basement of where this is going to go. You know, until this came up, I don't think there was a lot of room for this large of an innovation in the drum industry, and it really wasn't calling for it. I mean, no one was knocking my door down for this in the first place. But where I see this going in the future is somewhere that I can't even really think up yet. What we did with this drum, and there's 5 in existence right now. They're all slightly different, but they're based around a traditional looking drum. So at first glance, you might not even notice anything's different. I mean, I don't have drummers when we're on the road just catching this out of the corner of their eye and going, "Whoa, what is that?" They kind of have to get a little closer to it. But when they do, they can see and hear something that reminds them of a traditional drum, while also still inspiring them and thinking, "I've never seen anything like this before. What's possible from here?" So what we're concentrating on is showing that it does work. It does sound amazing. And with the help of Stratasys Direct, we've also recently learned that just by manipulating the materials and the print process alone, literally unchanged in the actual STL file that is used to print the drum, Stratasys Direct helped me to realize that with a different material and a different print method, we can make 3 drums or 100 drums that all sound drastically different depending on how we manipulate that. And again, this is the ground floor of where we can go in the future. I want to look back at this 10 years from now and just think, I could have never imagined where we are now, but it all started with a traditional drum, and now we can just start using your imaginations. So
Right.
back to answer your question real quick. If musicians want to start messing with this kind of thing, go for it. Go for it, and let me know what you come up with, because I'm super interested, and I'm a student of 3D printing or any cool innovation or engineering marvels that people still can come up with.
I mean, this could be like what the effects pedal did for the guitars. I mean, this could be, you know, what it could do for the drums, changing up the sound, and customizing.
I mean that. Yeah, exactly. That whole world is still amazing me. I mean, even Fender is constantly coming out with these new guitar pedals that it's like, how did someone not think of that until now?
Right.
But look, there it is. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's no stopping that industry. It's very cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. I mean, it's really exciting. And Stratasys Direct, I want to direct people there too, if that's that's where you're working with. So,
yeah, they're great.
so Stratasys.
Oh yeah, you know what? I should have said that. I should have said, if you have any cool ideas or crazy ideas that you maybe think aren't possible, go to Stratasys Direct for sure, and they'll show you. They'll show you that it is possible.
We'll edit that in, and then I'll edit out the robot arms comment. So we'll pretend that.
Yeah, no, keep it. That was fun.
All right, well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, you being here on Digital Trends Live.
Of course, thanks for having me.
All right, so that is just awesome. Talking about 3D printing and how it's changing, you know, music, what that could mean. I think that key moment that he just said, you know, 10 years from now, where are we going to be? What's that going to look like? I mean, that's just so cool to talk